Wise Wednesdays started on April 1st with a humble episode on forgiveness. Between then and now, we've had heart-led conversations on happiness, stress management, relationships, resilience, public speaking, respecting boundaries, self-discovery, mindset, just being, listening, reclaiming your life, intuition, and even food. I would like to thank all my listeners and the guests who gave me their time and trust. It is because of you that we kept going. It is because of you that we kept growing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so, so much for joining us on episode 68 of Wise Wednesdays with RK. I am your host, Rukaya Khan. I am an ICF certified coach. I am a master practitioner, NLP. I come from the world of words and largely am known as the smile strategist. I am super, super excited today to bring to you my star speaker, Hazelman. He's been trailblazing in the profession, in the education industry for the past 10 years. With experience spanning across Singapore and Australia, Hazelman is experienced in leading education leaders, parents, and students on transformative education and personal journeys. I've known him for a long, long time of learning together. Literally, he's my peer coach and someone I have enjoyed having conversations with, which is why I said, let's do this. So today we will be speaking about doing what is right and not what is easy. A conversation that you might often have at work, at home, with your friends, with your family. So without further ado, I bring to you the decorated and celebrated Hazelman.
Thank you,
Hey,
Rukaya. Thank you for the introduction.
thank you. Thank you for joining us. And again, I appreciate everyone who is giving us your time. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and give a little pat on the back to the host platform. Um, Hazelman, we are today talking about doing what is right and not what is easy.
Yep.
And I've heard you say this so many times. In fact, I even read it on your LinkedIn. So, what does this thought mean to you?
I think let me just begin by thanking you tremendously and your very faithful group of followers because you had to change the time to accommodate people in Melbourne and Singapore. So thank you very much for that. Coming back to that question, I think it's if I take you on a journey, let me go a little bit back. I've always been fascinated with words, and I always find that words can be so powerful. And I remembered that distinctively, this idea of a slogan, right, or motto or rallying cry actually stuck with me when I was in the army. And you kind of see the power, uh, even something as simple as leave no man behind, right? You keep hearing this, and you see great acts of heroism, and you see, people winning medal of valor and such. Why? Just because they felt that honor, that brotherhood, that loyalty from something as simple as leave no man behind. Right. So when I was in the army as well, I had a crazy commander who would put us through hell, and then he would ask us, right, when the body cries enough, then we're supposed to echo back, the mind asks for more. As cliche as that sound, when you are there and you're saying it, right, the mind asks for more, something happens in your brain. And then suddenly you feel that I could just do this a little bit more, right? I can push a little bit harder, right? I can run a little bit further. So I've always been fascinated by that idea that this group of words that you put together have such a tremendous power. So when I became a very young head of department, and I'm trying to figure out how to lead a team. And the first thing I did was come up with a vision, and then a mission. But then I begin to realize very quickly that when you are in the classroom, right, and then you're not having a very easy time because the students is giving you a little bit of a headache, you're not going to remember the vision. You're not going to remember the mission. That's not what you're going to be remembering. And so I needed to have something that the teachers can remember and go with, right? Even when they're in moments of distress, right? Even when they're in moment of stress. And that was where it came up with, right? So I asked myself, what is that group of words that I can use that is true to me, right?
Hmm.
There is something that I exemplify, right? There's something that when my teachers look at me and they say, those are not just empty words. This guy actually is living it. And so that's how that word came about, right? Doing what is right and not what is easy, right? So when you are in a classroom, those words you will remember. You won't remember, that you need to go and do restorative approach or whatever else. You will remember that you need to do what is right, not what is easy, especially when it is at the most difficult. So that's how that slogan or the rallying cry came about.
Beautiful. So, taking a step back from that question, tell us about your journey because, as I said, you're a celebrated teacher, someone who has been rewarded and awarded for his work in a short span of 5 years. So, tell us a little about that journey because that's really going to give people insights on where you're coming from with this slogan.
Well, I've always felt a little bit difficult, right? Trying to tell my journey and accomplishment, but here it goes. I started as a beginning teacher in 2010. And then very quickly into it, I was thrown into the deep end. So I was given a difficult class for me to start off with, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, right? The first encounter going into the classroom wasn't easy, right? So I was given that class for about 6 months, and then I had to learn very quickly how do you navigate, right, a class of students who didn't feel that education was the priority, right, because of all the different circumstances that they had. Then, so after 6 months, I thought, okay, that's it, I've done my time. What then happened was I was then given my first normal technical class. So in Singapore, a normal technical class usually scares people when somebody tells you that you're about to be a form teacher of a normal technical class. I must say that I lost sleep the night before school started. I can't sleep that night, knowing full well that I was about to be a form teacher of a normal technical class. I still remember they were supposed to call the students beforehand. I think about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before school start, we're supposed to make that first phone call and then ask the student to bring certain things on the first day just to break that ice. And I remember my hand was trembling as I was trying to pick up the phone and call the kids. So that was how I started. Then I got my first normal tech form class, and that was where I learned how little I knew about teaching. I remember my first lesson, I walked in and then I was trying to teach them civics and moral education, right? The topic was on family. Now, I thought this was the most easiest topic in the world. I was supposed to go in and then ask, right? So, okay, what is your family structure? And then, okay, so mother, father. And then the students started telling me things like, oh, we don't live with our parents, right? I don't know who's my dad, right? Or I don't know who's my mother. I'm actually staying with my grandmother. And then as you ask a little bit more, you begin to realize that it becomes more and more complex.
Hmm.
Uh, then you realize, oh my goodness, something as simple as family is, right? Even then, I have no idea. So I was taught a very important lesson by my class that I cannot assume.
Awesome.
Yep. And I came in with the confidence that I could, be strong, and then I could bend them to my will. But then I realized very early on, no, it didn't happen. So I went through that for about a year, and I think what happened was the school leaders took a look at it and realized that okay, this guy has the heart for this group of kids. Number one, and number two is willing to put in the hard work and actually learn. And so very early on, then they asked me about 1.5 years into teaching whether I was willing to try a position, and that was how I first started. I tried a position. I was the acting level head, so I was taking care of all the secondary three. Secondary three will be your year 10, year
Okay.
9. I think year 9. Let's say 7, 8, and 9. Yep, year 9. So that's your entire year 9, which is your these are 12, 13, 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, 15 years old. Right, 15-year-old students. So I started doing that first. So taking care of the whole entire level. Then they decided that okay, you're ready for the first appointment. So 1 year later, wait, let me see, 3.5 years into teaching, I was given the subject head for discipline. So I was the assistant discipline master for the entire school. Then 1 year after that, I was given the head of department, where I was then the head of department of normal technical. kids. So that was that journey. I spent quite 3 years as a head of department for normal technical. Somewhere in the middle of that was when I won that award in 2015, and the and I didn't. When I was first told that my vice principal came to me and told me that she was going to be putting my name up for the award, I didn't feel that I did anything that was too special, right? So I just felt that I was just doing my job. But then what she told me then, right, as he was writing, as he says that if you were just doing your job and this was not an accomplishment, then you wouldn't get in, right? So it's fine. Let's just send this in. Then I went and became a finalist, and then I actually won the award. And I was doing crazy things back then. I was driving to my students' home, picking them up, bringing them to school. I was cutting my students' hair in order to keep them in school. I was doing everything I could possibly do in order for me to be able to keep them in school. So that was what I was doing. And then I was trying to see whether I could build the self confidence and self esteem of these kids. And I decided to go with late coming first. So if the kids can somehow find a way to be early in school, that would be the first success that they will actually have. So I went with that, right? So then I brought the late coming incidents in school down. I think we improved by about 60, 70%. Had a great team that helped me do that. So then that was also one of the reasons why I won that particular award. 3 years into that, I was given an opportunity to go to Ministry of Education Singapore headquarters, where I was then there for 2 years. I was in the Skills Policy Division. So that's my journey. And then I decided to leave and then come here to Melbourne.
Lovely. What a journey. And what I'm picking up from what how you shared about what you did was, what stood out for me was the fact that you went the extra mile.
Yep.
You went the extra mile. So, a question for the listeners, and let me know if this resonates with you. Has there ever been a time that you went the extra mile? And if you did, what did that do for you? I'd like for the audience to participate to let me know, did you ever go the extra mile? And what does going the extra mile mean to you? Just let me know in one word or one sentence. And yeah, we'll wait for the comments to come in because we want to make this as interactive as possible and look deeper into what it is. Uh, Great. So tell me, Hazelman, you what going the extra mile? True. Also, looking at the things from a very different perspective, because here was an opportunity for you to give up and say, no, this is a difficult batch to handle. These are students that are not going to listen to me. But you pushed through. You kept going. So, how does one keep going through even on those difficult days? What was the driving force for you?
I think in the beginning it was very difficult. And any normal tech form teacher will tell you this, right? It's just scary. It's just scary walking into a classroom where you have kids that, again, education is not a priority, and all the issues that's happening in their life, right, makes it very, very complex and very difficult to teach them. Um, I've told this story to my department. I think the first day that I became the head of department. So let me tell you this story so you have an idea of where that drive came from. Uh, and this particular story was, I think it was about 2 years before I actually started teaching. So I was a trainee teacher. So during in Singapore, when you have studying to be a teacher, right, you're doing a 4 years degree program with the with education, you will actually go to schools every year, right? So they will send you to schools in order for you to get an idea of what schools are like. So I remember this was in my second year in university. So I was sent to this particular school, and then we were sitting down in this room, right? So all the trainee teachers were together, and then we were having a discussion. And then this teacher walked in, and she was very upset, right? So she was very upset, and then she was saying that, "What is this?" Right? Walked into class, students are not ready, right? And then they don't even want to listen to me, right? So she was not happy. And then she sat down, and then we started having that conversation as to why we became teachers, right? So because it doesn't look easy. At that point in time, we realized that, okay, it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So then then we were asking each other, right? So why did you become a teacher? Why are you in this particular profession? And then it got to me, and I was naive back then, right? Inexperienced, naive, Uh, and the response I gave was this. I said I became a teacher because I'm trying to give my students hope, right? And then I went on and say that it doesn't matter, right, who gives up on them. So I say the society can give up on them, right? Their friends can give up on them. The rest of the teachers can give up on them. Even their parents can give up on them, but I'll be the one person who will not give up on them. So that was what I said, right? Again, naive, inexperienced, idealistic back then. And then, when you're saying it, and because you're saying it with conviction, you can feel the hair at the back of your neck starts to stand. And I think the universe heard me, and the universe said, okay, since that's what you're saying, I'm gonna give you a journey that's appropriate to what you just said. And then it went, yes. So after that, all the appointments that I was given, all the postings that I was given, all the classes that I was given from then on was the tough ones. But when it got really, really tough, surprisingly, it was the words of a naive, inexperienced, and idealistic me that I hear in my head. Right? That you are the guy who says that you are the only one who's going to ensure that you still give your students hope, regardless of how difficult it is. So that was what kept me going. That voice in my head that tells me that you made that declaration, right, with conviction. So now you're going to have to walk the walk.
Walk the walk, absolutely. I completely hear you, because when I'm having these daily conversations, now we also have these weekly interviews, but when I do my daily conversations, I think the conviction there is I'm showing up for anyone who needs it. And there could be times when I've switched on live and I'm doing the live on day 1000, 100, whatever, and no one's showed up. There's not a single viewer, but I'm still speaking with so much of passion and so much of presence, because I know whoever needs to stumble on that conversation will get there and receive the message. So it's just about knowing what you're out there to deliver. And in earlier conversations with you, Hazelman, what stood out for me was the fact that it's the person is not the behavior.
Yep.
Yeah, could you share a little bit more on that, please?
And it was an idea uh, that came to me because I was actually there were two of us that were chosen by then my principal for this particular course, right? So it was supposed to be a 2 days course. It's on restorative approach, and then we were supposed to be trained by these two gentlemen from New Zealand, right? No idea what was restorative approach at that point in time. What I've heard about restorative approach at that point in time was something I didn't like because the what people were saying that it's very soft. It's a very soft approach, right? And then at that point in time in school, everybody wants a hard approach. Everybody wants a punitive. Everybody wants a consequence fast. So I went into that course, but with an open mind, right? Knowing that okay, let's see what this is about. And then what I realized was something that was really amazing because in that particular 2 days course, right, some of the things that they were saying resonate with me. Like what I told you as well, right? Which is this: if a child cannot read, you actually teach the child, right? If the child cannot count, you teach the child, right? If the child cannot swim, you teach the child how to swim. But if the child cannot behave, what do? Suddenly you don't teach. You jump straight to punish. Right, so then that resonate with me that, oh my goodness, I'm an educator by training, right? An educator at heart. And yet I was doing the same thing, that if the child cannot behave, suddenly it becomes something that I feel is deliberate, that the child is
Mm-hmm.
doing this on purpose. But when a child cannot read and the child cannot write, it's fine. Then you say that, oh, it must be because, that the child's background, or somebody never taught this child, so I'm going to go, the extra mile and help this child learn. So why that discrepancy then? So that was the core that actually got me, right, in restorative approach. Then I begin to realize that the child expected behavior is expected by who?
Hmm.
Right? So I come from a very different background from the child. I assume that the child know what's the social norm or the behavior that's expected because of my background. But if you look at where these kids come from, some of these kids, they're in rental flat, they're sharing it with multiple people, they're in survival mode. Right? Usually when I bring my teachers for house visit, right, the question I always ask myself and ask them is, if you went through what this child went through, are you sure you're gonna turn out the same? Right? Are you sure you're gonna be the same person? So I'm not sure about that, right? Personally, that if I went through what these poor kids went through on a daily basis, to the homes that they are going to on a daily basis, I have no, I don't think I'll be where I am today. So then how am I to expect that they know what's my social norm of how you're supposed to behave? Right? So that is the first foundation there. Right? So then I begin to realize as well that this is something that can be taught, that you actually can have a conversation with a child, right? For them to then realize that what they did may not be the appropriate thing. And it has a lot of effect on people. So if you look at restorative approach, it's a very simple thing. It's about having conversation. Like what you and me are having now, right? It's just a simple conversation with four simple questions. So let me just give you an example just to show you the power of it. So let's say if a child is sleeping in class, right? Normal approach is, why are you sleeping in class? Right? And then the child tells you, I sleep in class because your lesson is boring. What are you going to do
Okay.
about it? There's nothing you can do about it, right? Then what happens? Then it starts to escalate. Then it goes to somewhere that you are not willing for it to go, right? And then the conversation then turns into something that is negative. But if I ask the child what happened, and the child say that, okay, I fell asleep in your class, right? Then I say, okay, who's affected when you do something like that? I didn't ask the why. I
Hmm.
asked who is affected. Then the child say, okay, maybe I'm affected, right? Maybe I'm affected here, right? Because I'm not paying attention to you, right? Or maybe then I say, okay, who else is affected? Says you are affected because you're trying to teach and I'm sleeping in your class. Who else is affected? So you push a little bit more, and then you begin to realize that then the child will start thinking, and the child will realize that, oh my goodness, it's not only me who's affected, it's not only you who's affected. Now my friends are affected because they see me sleeping in class and they think that this is the right thing to do, right? So people start. The child begins to realize that because of that simple action that the child did, a lot of people are now affected. Then comes the third question, which is a very powerful one. How do we make this right?
Hmm.
Right? How do we make this right? So then the child will tell you that, okay, can I apologize to you for sleeping in your class? You say, okay, cool, right? What does an apology sound like then? So let's say the child say, okay, let me try and apologize to you. Say, cool. Then the fourth question, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Then the child say, okay, maybe the next time when I'm feeling sleepy, I'll ask you for permission, then I'll go and wash my face, right? Or if I'm feeling sleepy, can I stand up and go to the back of the class? Right? Whatever agreement that you have with the child. They say, okay, cool, right? Then you write that down. And then the child signs it and you sign it. So that's not an agreement between you and the child. Do you realize that just having that simple conversation with a child, suddenly you build that rapport between you and the child? So when I see that child in class the next time and the child is about to put a head on the table, all I need to do is to look at the child and the child will know that, okay, teacher, can I go to the toilet? I need to wash my face. Or can I go and walk to the back of the class? I just need to stand for a while. So that's the beauty of it. That misbehavior that we now is not personal. It is an action that can be changed. It's an action that can be corrected or improved upon. And the child have the power to decide how they're going to go about on this journey. And that makes it extremely, extremely powerful.
It's like changing, shifting the ownership. Like instead of making it your problem as the teacher, you are shifting the ownership to the child and giving them the power to make the change for
Exactly right.
themselves and helping
Exactly
the
right.
others. Beautiful. So Hazelman, the first question was what has happened, right?
Yep. What happened?
What happened, and then we have how is
Who's affected?
who's affected. Okay, I've got Lata ma'am watching, an amazing educator and someone I have hold a lot of respect for. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. So, what happened? Who is responsible? Okay,
Who's affected? Not
who's
responsible.
affected?
Right.
Sorry, sorry,
Who's
sorry.
affected? Yeah.
I'm just going to let you dictate.
Yeah. So who's
And
affected?
yes,
How do we make this right?
how do we make this right? Okay,
And then how do we ensure this doesn't happen again?
great. And how I'm looking at this is, how do we ensure that this
Doesn't happen again.
so Isman, it's not just about schools or in the education sphere that these questions and conversations can be used, this approach can be used. Even when we look at the workplace, for instance, when things go wrong among colleagues, sometimes what happens is people talk about each other instead of talking to each other, right? So how can we bring the restorative approach within other areas apart from education?
I think the most natural area where this can be used is in homes, right? What was interesting was I was an educator and I was doing this on a daily basis in school. But it never occurred to me that I was a parent as well, that I could actually do this with my kids. Right. So
Hmm.
that was a a learning in itself, right? That you're doing this so, so naturally in school, but when you come back home, you're a parent. And whether we like it or not, the style of parenting that we usually have is influenced by the kind of parenting that we receive, right? But then I begin to realize that actually this is possible, right? That you can have this conversation with your kids as well. And but having this conversation as a parent is a little bit trickier, right? Because parents, you feel very strongly about what your kid did as well, right? So there is that emotion part that you need to kind of manage as well. But if you can manage the emotion part first and calm yourself down enough to have this conversation with your child, you realize again you are going to strengthen that relationship that you have with your child, right?
Hmm.
Then, like what you say, in the workplace as well, do you realize that the entire conversation has got nothing to do with you, right? Being a difficult person or terrible person. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got to do with what happened. So in the workplace, if you kind of keep these questions in your head, right, and then have that conversation, then you realize that it's never about the why. Right? Why are you doing this? Why are you making my life so difficult? It's not about the why. It's about what happened, right? So if you're having a conversation, I naturally ask, okay, what happened here? Okay, oh my goodness, right? This thing happened, right? Then who's affected of this, right? Just explore it first, right? So how do we get this right, right? How do we make this right at this particular moment? No blame. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just asking, how do we make this right? And then, okay, so what do we do now to prevent this from happening again, right? Nice, non-threatening, non-judgmental, right? And
Very
that's the
good.
kind of conversation that you want to have, right? In order for you to kind of bring people forward.
I love that. And as you were saying that, what came to my mind was, it's not just about those conversations outside of you, but also conversations within you.
Yep.
Because when something bad happens to you, the first question you ask is, "Why are you doing this to me?" You know. So shifting from the why, because I think why somehow puts you on the wrong side of the equation. I love this. Thank you so much for bringing this to the conversation. Just a simple thing as asking what happened is neutral.
And I just want to add to what you said as well, is that we all have this tendency to beat ourselves up, right? I know I did that a lot, right, in the very beginning as well, that when something doesn't go right, the voice that you have in your head will ask you, why? Why can't you even get that right? Right?
Mm,
So why does it have to be that way? Right? What's wrong? Right? So you find that we have the tendency to beat ourselves up as well. Right? So you are absolutely right. If you can then have this conversation with yourself, right? Again, it's a discerning conversation that you're having, not critical. It's not a critical conversation you're having. It is a non-judgmental, right? Discerning conversation that you have with yourself just to figure out what happened,
mm,
right? And then so that you can then realize that okay, these are some of the steps that I can take now to correct this. These are some of the things I can do to ensure that this doesn't happen again. That's it.
yep. So when you say steps, the first thing that comes to my mind is my 5 step smile strategy. And the first step within that is silence the mind, which it's an acronym. So it's silence the mind. The smile strategy is basically an acronym. It stands for silence the mind, manage your attention, identify the intention, let things go, and energize the possibilities. So, the very first thing is to silence the mind. And when you are asking a why question, when you're in a stuck situation, when you're challenged, you're going to find all the reasons why it is. However, if you first start with silencing the mind and then managing your attention, that's when you're able to find the focus and move forward. So, yes, definitely the steps and how you play them out is also so important. Okay, we've got a question from
Yep.
Kunain. He says, how do you manage am- amygdala attack moments while facing tough situations? Yes, thank you for that question.
A very good question. Very powerful question.
Yes,
Um, and to answer that, I just want to tell you a story. And this is something that happened to this wonderful, very, very intelligent lady called Jill Taylor. I think you can actually check her out. She has a TED Talk. I think her name, the title of a TED Talk is My Stroke of Insight. So this lady is a brain anatomist, right? So she studies the human brain. And I believe she's at Harvard, so she was studying the human brain at Harvard. And what happened was one day she woke up and she realized that she was having a stroke. So hence the TED Talk is My Stroke of Insight, right? So but as he was having this stroke, so this is an amazing moment, right, for a brain anatomist. You've been studying the brain all your life, and now you actually see it in
not the
action when it's
moment.
going through. Yeah. So, but what she realized was, as she was having that stroke, and I've told this story to a few people because I find this to be extremely inspirational, that while she's having that stroke, she realized that that mind chatter that she had completely disappeared,
Yep.
right? So it was completely gone. Now she feels this overwhelming and euphoric sense of peace and a sense of calm. Now, you're going through a stroke at this particular moment, right? Knowing full well, number one, you might be paralyzed, half your body might be gone. Number two, your career is going down the drain, and yet she felt this immense and euphoric calmness, right? And what she realized was, after she recovered, that the reason for that was because the blood flow to certain part of her brain was actually stopped, and it's the blood flow to the what we call the survival part of the brain that was actually stopped. And so she was sensing the world with something that is a higher order part of her brain, and then suddenly that's where that sense of euphoric calmness, right, that sense of being part of the of everything around you, being part of the universe, it came in. So it was amazing. So what she began to realize was that the way we feel and the way we judge things has got to do with where the blood supply is going. And so that is why you find that people will do mindfulness and meditation because they're trying to strengthen that part of the brain. Because imagine this, right? Let me just give you, as a biologist, let me just give you this idea. If you're sitting in the wild and then doing absolutely nothing and then concentrating on your breathing, you're going to get eaten, right? So that need for that chatter is where your survival part of the brain lives, right? To look around, make sure that everything is okay with you. So the ability to actually sit down and do nothing and concentrate on your breathing accesses the other part of your brain, right? The part of your brain that's the higher order. Now, as a coach, I went through this very interesting course, which is positive intelligence.
Yes,
I think it's by Shazad.
yes, she's that.
Yeah,
She's
so
that.
he's wonderful. So what he does, or what he uh, trains you to do within that particular program, if I just to share with you a little bit, actually deals with that question that was being asked. When you face something, first thing you need to do is to call it out. That these are voices that you're hearing in your head, and these voices is not you. So call it out first, right? And then say, "Oh, here it comes again."
The
If you can
saboteur.
name it, right? Bob, right? I call mine the judge, right? I think which is what Shazad calls his as well, right? Judge.
Yes,
So when it comes, call it out first and understand that it has hijacked you, right? It's here it comes again. Just calling it out. That's it. And then the moment you feel it, then you breathe. Take 3 deep breaths, right? You breathe in, count to 4, hold for 4, and then breathe out for 4. Do it 3 times, 4 times, you realize that the power of that voice will then lessen a little bit. I have never been successful in silencing the voice, but I have been very successful in lowering the volume. So from a volume of 8 to 9, it will go down to about 2 to 3. right? Then you find that you can lower it down. And then when you lower it down, then it becomes easier for you to be a bit more objective, right? If you understand positive intelligence, that's what Rukaya is putting there, which is a sage perspective will then come in, right? The ability for you to access your PQ part or your higher part of your brain. So that's what you do. Call it out and then breathe. Call it out and then breathe. And then you realize that after a while, you get really good at it and then it becomes very easy. But understand this, right? Just like I think the analogy he gave as well is this: if I want to build my muscle and I'm go to the gym, I will not be able to build my muscle in a day, right? I have to carry the weights for months before I be able to carry a heavier weight. So same thing, as you're doing this practice, you realize that you're going to get hijacked and there's nothing you can do about it because you don't have your that part of your brain is not strong enough for you to be able to deal with it at this point in time. But keep at it and you realize that over time you're going to have the ability to kind of lower the volume a little bit more and lower it fast and then deal with it in a more sage manner.
Absolutely. Sage manner, indeed.
Yep.
Yes. um, we're looking at hijacking, being hijacked by emotions. What about the times where you really need to look at the outside and then align yourself accordingly? What do you say for that? I mean, it could be, again, in the education space, it could be on the outside, it could be anything. What about those times that you're questioning yourself?
Well, from my experience, I find that if you are too emotional, right, and you're too invested in that particular moment, the judgment that you make is not going to be the most sound. So I have done this on multiple times where I am very upset with what a student have done, and I know I'm upset, right? And as I'm trying to have this conversation with the student, I realize that I am not in the right frame of mind. So I'll tell the student, I say, I'm too upset to have a chat with you right now, right? I'm too upset to have this conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk away, right? And I'm going to calm myself down. Then I will have a conversation with you, right? Because I don't want this conversation, right, to turn in a way that I don't want it to turn simply because I can't manage my state of mind at this particular point in time. And I've done that many times. And then I walk away. And I guess what happens is then the student begin to realize that it's okay to do that, right? Then they start doing the same thing, right? So let's say they're very upset and they come and see me and they say, okay, teacher, do you mind? Can you give me a bit of time? I just need to calm myself down, right? Then I'll come back and because I don't want to say anything to you that I didn't mean and I don't want to make the situation worse. So you just kind of give them that it's okay. It's okay, right? As an adult, I'm showing you that this is fine. I can walk away first, right? So in those kind of situations, I find that I try not to deal with it. I just walk away first and calm myself down, figure out what's the game plan, and then go ahead and deal with it, right? When you're ready and you have kind of thought through it. So that's one. But sometimes it's an emergency, right? You're rushing in, someone's about to start a fight and things like that. So that one is different. That one again, you just going in there, right? You're making sure that nobody is hurting anybody, and then you're putting a stop to it. If you find that at that point in time you are ready and the kids are ready, then you can kind of bring them aside and then have a chat. But usually I tell you that nobody's ready at that point in time. So it's more of isolating them first, putting them in a room, giving them a glass of water, letting them calm down first. Then you're going to have that conversation. So I find that usually in the thick of the moment, not the best time for you to go and make any decision. It's just about diffusing first and then taking stock and then figuring out what you want to do.
Beautiful. I like that. And that can be applied not just in the school, but outside of it as well, in different conversations. Lovely.
Yep.
And we've got Gopalan who says, agreed, don't engage when you are upset. The person you are speaking with will only experience the anger, the intent, and message goes missing. Applies at home and when dealing with our children, our spouse as well. Absolutely. And our bosses too. So Kunen says, thank you so much. Um, Lata ma'am says, good strategy. Says, thank you for the answer. Thank you so much, everybody, for engaging. Yes, that was great. We had, I think it was a question or that Gopalan had asked some time back. Sorry, we didn't get to that. He
No
says,
worries.
knowing the difference between doing things right versus doing the right things is.
Mm.
Tell us a little about that. What in your understanding is the difference between doing things right versus doing the right thing?
Well, in my mind, doing things right is will be, I think usually people will say going by the book, right? So following the last letter of the book. So following all the rules and such, right? But doing the right things sometimes does not mean that you follow the book. I think that's Gopalam, feel free to correct me here, right? But that's my sense of what you're saying as well. Which is then I find myself doing the right thing many times that may not necessarily be doing things right.
Mm.
Like I give you an example, right? I cut. I mean, I had a situation where I cut my students' hair to keep them in school. That is a no-no, right? If any of my teachers tell me that they're going to start cut the students' hair, I will tell them, no, you don't do such a thing, right? You're not supposed to do such a thing, right? But at that point in time, the circumstance was very different for me, right? And if I were to just give you a little bit, and in fact, this was one of the most powerful learning moment for me from a student, right? So the student was about to be sent home, right? My discipline master wanted to send the student home because his hair was really, really bad. And then he came to me and then he says, teacher, can you cut my hair? And I was like, no, because, just a few weeks back, there is a newspaper article that came out about a teacher that cuts a student hair and then he got into trouble. So I said, I'm not about to get myself into trouble by cutting your hair. And then he says, no, teacher, no, I'm going to get sent home. And this is my form class, right? And he says, I just need you to cut my hair, right? And I say, okay. I say, if you are that adamant about it, pick up the phone, call your parents. I want to talk to them, right? And ask for permission. So he called mom, and then I spoke to mom and I say, your kid wants me to cut his hair. I have no idea how to cut hair, right? But he's insisting that I cut his hair so that he can stay in school. Are you okay with it? Then mom says, yeah, 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 I'm okay with it. So I went to my discipline master, who then told me, of course, no, don't touch the student hair, right? And then I say, I already called mother. Mother says, okay. Then he says, no. Mother says, okay. Then what about the father? So I went back out. I said, okay, call your father. Right. Then I spoke to the father, and father says, yes, go ahead. He says, if it's okay for you to cut hair, go ahead and cut his hair. So I said, okay. I said, I'm going to take a chance here. Right. I'm going to cut your hair. Right. And this again, I'm definitely not by the book. Right. And again, this is something that I don't advocate any teachers to do. But I cut the student's hair. Right. And we were cutting it in the toilet. Can you imagine the scene? This is borrowed somebody's comb, took those scissors, with the one with the plastic covering, so the one that you
Oh,
use to for craft. Yep, it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
even the
yeah.
scissors you use to cut hair, correct? So I'm cutting the hair in the toilet, and I'm asking him, okay, how do I cut your hair? And he says, oh, teacher, you just comb down, right, and then you just cut above the ear because there is a school rule, right, and then after you just cut above the collar. So I say, okay, and then cut above the eyebrow. So I say, okay. So I'm saying I'm combing down. I'm holding your hair now, and I can hear the scissors actually, you know, trying to cut through the hair. And then okay, then he says, okay, thank you. Went to class. 20 minutes later, the rest of the friends came to me, and this is my form class. They asked me, teacher, what do you do to his hair? It's terrible. And I was embarrassed, right? And I said, okay, I said, okay, out of the rest of you, who knows how to cut hair? Then one of them said, teacher, I know how to cut hair. I used to cut my brother's hair, right? I said, okay, call him back, and then let's see whether we can kind of correct what I've done. And then so I called him back, and you know what he said to me? He said, I tell you, he almost he was very close to reducing me to tears. What he told me was, he says, teacher, don't worry, this is hair, and hair can grow. And I was like, wow. And and that was the most powerful lesson for me, right? And again, if I went by the book at that point in time, this is a lesson that I would never have learned. Right? As far as he's concerned, I did him something that allowed him to stay in school at that particular point in time. No matter how bad his hair is, that is temporary. His hair will grow. And then he walked away. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
And this came from a student.
It's beautiful. It's like moments like these that give you the opportunity to touch lives and change them, change the way they look at themselves, even for that matter. So
Yeah.
hats off to you, Hazelman. Seriously.
But
Gopal,
please don't
yes.
go around cutting your students' hair. This is not a
Ah, but what you taught him in that moment was he could trust you. There was so much that he learned and you learned. trusting yourself. You know, education is so much more important. Just realizing that he wanted to be in that class so bad that it didn't make a difference to him who cut his hair. He just needed to get into the class. Yes, navigating in a difficult situation. Thank you, Gopalan. Yes, so important, and these lessons stay for a long, long time. My first experience as a coach to teach was at a 3 day camp, personality development camp, where I was given this batch of 14 and 15-year olds. I stand perfectly 5 feet tall, and to walk in with all these boys and girls who are taller than me and to be their coach was the interesting experience of my life. But what I played on was my ability to build rapport with them, give them importance, help them learn from each other, and those conversations were so enlightening to me as a learning coach. It was great. And at the end of the four, it was a 4 day camp. At the end of the 4 days, we have a certificate ceremony where every batch receives a certificate of participation, and the coaches are also acknowledged for the time they give. And it was beautiful. When my name was called on, I had my batch stand up and give me an
Yep.
ovation.
You will clap. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So while all of these others received their certificates just like that, my batch stood up for me, and it gives me goosebumps. It was
Yep.
so beautiful, when children acknowledge you, because they come with so much of purity. Yes, they do sometimes wear those filters of I know everything, but then once they realize that this other person is willing to listen to me, it makes all that difference in the world. So thank you for being that educator that you are.
And again, I must emphasize this that I'm only one person, right? When I was the head of department, it was my teachers who actually carried the heavy weight. And it was my teachers who were willing to do the crazy things that I was putting in their head, right? And then saying that, okay, this might work, and we were doing the visions together, we're doing the mission together. Even this particular slogan, right? To do what is right and not what is easy. This was something that we decided that, okay, as a department, this is something that we believe in, something that we want to do. And on a day-to-day basis, it is the teachers, it is my normal tech form teachers who actually struggled, right? And were carrying most of the weight. So so it's not just me, right? This is an amazing, amazing bunch of educators, right? That I truly, truly miss. I think this was one of my best team that I actually led. So I truly miss them, and I think I need to acknowledge that they were carrying a lot of the day-to-day grind and the day-to-day weight as well.
It's important to be surrounded by the right people, and it's beautiful once you set your mind to it. It's fascinating how the right people step into your space, and
Yep.
and they shoulder your responsibility. So yes, supporting your team. Well done, Hazelman. Thank you, Gopal, and thank you, Mufaddal, for joining us. So yes, supporting your team is important, and having habits of success, having doing these things consistently is super important. If you were in one zone on one day, and then a week down the line, if you gave up on that mission to be that person trusting the children, your journey would be very different, and their journey would be very different.
Exactly. You
It's
must have the tenacity and the resilience, right? Every single day. And then again, like I say, the what inspire me on a daily basis is number one, that words of a naive and inexperienced teacher was sitting in that room, and number two, the fact that my team was working really, really hard, right? And I every conversation that I have on a daily basis, I could see how hard they were working and how much of their heart they were putting into this as well. So that kept you going as a leader as well. And I was trying to ensure that I create a culture where we could be very frank and transparent with each other, and we could tell each other all the difficulties that we were having. Is no judgment as you as a teacher or as a leader, right? These are difficult, this is a difficult circumstance, so you must have a safe space where you can come in and say that, oh my goodness, this is what happened in the class, right? I need help here, I have no idea how to navigate this. Okay, let's get and decide as a department how we're going to kind of figure these things out. So that was very important as well, having a nice safe environment for your team.
Teamwork
Yeah.
definitely makes a difference. And Gopalan says sometimes the wrong people become the strongest ambassadors to carry out your work. Yes, if you support them. I like, yes, if you
Yep.
support them. And I think if you walk your talk, even those who are, who are not able to understand what your journey is all about, if you're constantly walking your talk and you're showing results, people will then begin to align with you. They begin to realize that, oh, there is evidence of success here, there is evidence of change that you're creating, and so I'd like to partner with this person, or I'd
Yep.
like to join the mission. So yes, that makes a massive difference.
Success is very infectious. So what we
Oh,
realized was,
so exactly.
again, like I said, even when I was trying to bring the late coming numbers down, I had a team. I had amazing, amazing people who were willing to do things differently, right? Just to see whether it will actually work. But the moment the success started happening and the numbers started going down, you'd be surprised. Now suddenly everybody wants to be a part of it, right? Everybody wants, because it's infectious. So you're absolutely right. Success is infectious.
Yes, a game that I would play with these students. Again, I said the taller than me was, we'd pass the ball around, and we'd have to call out the other persons. This is a camp, and nobody knows each other. Everybody's come from different places, so just passing the ball around and shouting out the person's name, whoever you're throwing the ball to, would help them register and remember the name. And anyone who drops the ball is, gets a punishment, or the team gets to kind of, ask them to do something. So it was fun. It's simple tasks often leave the largest of impact. And one thing that I've begun to run is my mastermind program, which is 33 days of daily tasks that we get to do as a team together. And we have three different modules on topics that help you reset for success. So again, working on the parameters of having like-minded people to work through with is so, so important. So Hazelman, knowing that we're coming to the close of our hour, and I could go on talking with you forever, what is something that you would like to share with our listeners as closing comments, or maybe 5 things that people can do when they find themselves in a tough situation?
Right. So I think I have no idea whether you will go up to five, but again,
Okay.
I find myself number one, remember to breathe. Right? Remember to breathe, right? So every time you're in a difficult situation, you have no idea what you're going to do. You have voices that is screaming in your head, right? And then the situation look like it's out of order, right? Breathe first. Remember, you got to breathe first because you got to get yourself out of that survival mode that you're in, right? So call out the voices. So usually I'll call out the voices first and know that, okay, it's not putting me in a good state. That's number one. Number two, breathe first. If you can walk away in order for you to be able to kind of collect yourself and come back, then walk away and collect yourself, right? No harm in doing that. If you're in the middle of a classroom, you cannot walk away, then fine, breathe first, and then deal with the situation and diffuse it as best as you can, right? And then check yourself and see whether you're in the right state of mind to have those conversations. No point having that conversation if you're not in the right state of mind because you're going to make things worse. Same thing whether you're at a workplace, same thing whether you're at home. It is okay to walk away and withdraw yourself first, right? So I don't know whether that adds up to five, but that will be my advice, right? And you always find that if you walk away and calm yourself down, the solution will always be better and more productive for the long run.
Absolutely. So yes, 3 points that I've put in there, and we have Muharzet, who's watching. He says, "Do what is right so you can sleep easy."
Yep, that is my good friend
Thank
who.
you for
Yep.
joining us. Amazing conversation, Gopalan, and says Hazelman Rukaya. Thanks for making this conversation happen. Thank you for joining in and making adding value to this conversation, every one of you. And again, a simple request: if you haven't subscribed already, do subscribe to the channel, because here's where I post daily videos on the little things that make life big. And we also have these amazing weekly interviews with subject experts, thought leaders, change makers, people who are literally walking their talk. Hazelman, I can't let you go without asking you, what has Hazelman learned from being Hazelman?
I have learned not to take myself very seriously, right? I have learned that I take what I do seriously, right? But not myself. That I need to be able at the end of the day to laugh at some of the things that I've done, to understand that I'm on a journey and I'm only human, right? And to understand that if I'm patient with myself and empathetic to myself, then I'm more patient and empathetic to others.
I like that. So, if we were to close with one line, what would that be?
Do what is right, not what is easy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Hazelman, once again for your time. I am so glad this conversation was able to happen because it's so important, especially in these times that we are in, where there's so much of uncertainty around us. There's so many things going that we don't really have a grip over. And even in those situations, if you can just say to yourself to do what is right and not what is easy, because it's convenient to do what's easy, but doing what is right makes a difference. And that's why we shifted the time to what would be right to serve the community best. And
And I thank you for it. I know that it's really a difficult time for the usual crowd that you have, right? So thank you
yes,
so much.
yes, but those who could make it did make it, and those who will catch us on replay will catch us on replay. Thank you, everybody, for giving us your time, your energy, your focus, your attention. And until next week, thank you so much. Have a great rest of
Yep.
the evening.
Thank you everybody for joining in.